I'm Deepesh Patel, editor at Trade Finance Global. Today, we're at the BAFT Trade and Payments Conference here in Washington, DC, joined by real-time payments expert Keith Melton. Keith is Senior Vice President and RTP Strategic Program Manager at the Clearinghouse. Today, we're going to be discussing the transformative impact and future prospects of the real-time payments platform, recent regulatory updates, and the future of cross-border payments. Keith, welcome to Trade Finance Talks TV.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, quick introduction. Who are you, where are you from, and what do you do?
Sure. So, Keith Melton, Senior Vice President with the Clearinghouse. So I've got responsibility for strategic initiatives and product marketing. I've been with the Clearinghouse for about 4 months now, and I spend most of my time right now really focused on the RTP strategic program, really growing the network from a volume perspective, from a growth perspective, and really diving into use cases that are going to enable that growth. Before joining the Clearinghouse, I was with the Federal Reserve Financial Services for about 7 years. I was head of product management for financial services, so I had Fedwire Fund, Fedwire Securities, Fed ACH, check, and our Fedline connectivity. I had responsibility for product management, revenue management, pricing, and billing for all those services across the country. Prior to that, I was with IBM for about a decade. I ran their global banking and payment software business, so I had about a $100 million P&L, working with banks across the globe, helping modernize their payments platforms. And then prior to that, I was with SunTrust Bank. So I feel pretty fortunate that I've been able to see things from a commercial bank perspective, from a vendor perspective, from a central bank perspective, from a private sector operator perspective. And I think it helps me provide, have some empathy of the people I'm sitting across the table from and kind of their perspectives.
Thanks, Keith. And yeah, it's really important to connect the dots and really look at the end customer, the value proposition from a payments perspective. Can you give our audience an overview of what the Clearinghouse actually does and also what the key priorities are right now?
Sure, absolutely. So the Clearinghouse is a private sector payments operator. So we have networks for wire, for ACH, for real-time payments, and for, even check image clearing. So we've been a private sector operator for a very long time, over 171 years, founded in 1853 by a lot of the nation's largest banks. We've been in this business for a long time, and we've been driving collaboration and innovation in the space for a very long time. So we were actually the Fed before there was a Federal Reserve, and working with a lot of the institutions in times of crisis around printing currency, moving gold around, finding more efficient ways to clear checks, and more recently, really collaborating with the industry, the stakeholders around the new real-time payments rail. So that was launched about 6 years ago, and it's been a fun journey.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So what actually is the real-time payments platform, and what's the impact of this platform?
Sure. So the RTP, or Real-Time Payments Network, is a retail real-time gross settlement system. So it's transaction by transaction, clearing, settling, and having funds available instantly. It is unique in nature in that both sender and receiver can see confirmation of clearing and settlement and funds availability instantly. It's irrevocable in nature. It's a credit push system. And I think it's important to note that it's also based on a very data-rich messaging set based on ISO20022. So that allows for a lot of innovation and transparency into the payments as we move forward, in our payments landscape. Thank
you very much. I guess a key theme throughout this conference has been collaboration. It's critical to enable the success of emerging technologies. Can you talk about how the Clearinghouse perhaps collaborates with other players within the wider payments ecosystem, say banks, fintechs, and other vendors?
Yeah. So I would say I'd start probably with most recently the RTP network and collaborating with the Federal Reserve, collaborating with financial institutions across the U.S. It's truly a payments network available to everyone, both large institutions, smaller institutions, credit unions, community banks. It is the largest payments network, real-time payments network in the country, both from a value and reach perspective. We today have over 500 participants on the network. That represents about a 67% DDA reach. deposit account reach across the country, and that's growing at a fairly phenomenal clip. In Q4 2023, we processed about 74 million transactions on the RTP network. That represents about $39 billion in value, and we're growing at about 15% per quarter on the RTP network. And so I think that's a good example of where we worked with industry stakeholders, we worked with the financial institutions, we worked with a lot of the third-party service providers and technology providers to bring, a brand new payment rail to the market. The other thing that I would mention is that there are other examples of us collaborating, even recently, with industry stakeholders. So we recently brought a tokenization solution to the market to be able to tokenize DDA accounts for both the ACH network as well as the RTP network. And then we've more recently even started working with a lot of the third-party service providers on an onboarding process to really streamline the onboarding process for smaller institutions, smaller financial institutions, really any insured bank or credit union to be able to have access to the RTP network.
Thank you very much. Some good examples of collaboration there. I guess I'm going to throw a spanner in the works, which is regulation, and the regulatory landscape is something like that keeps changing and has been touted as one of the biggest challenges at this conference. What are some of those key challenges around changing regulations, and how is the Clearinghouse dealing with this?
Yeah. First, I'd say the Clearinghouse is again a private sector payments network operator. We process over $2 trillion in transactions per day. And I would say our primary focus is really working with our members, our owners, our financial institutions that are part of those networks to ease the use of those payment networks over time. And so making sure they're secure, they're reliable, they're resilient is our primary focus. We do watch regulation very closely, open banking, data privacy, what the CFPB is doing around 1033 is a good example. I think there's good potential for it to accelerate the growth of instant payments in the U.S., but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. And we know a lot of the financial institutions, as well as just the overall payments landscape, has been working with the regulators in that space.
Thanks, Keith. And you mentioned ISO20022, the new language, the new migration. How is TCH dealing with the CHIPS ISO20022 migration, and have there been any challenges in adopting this new language?
Yeah, that's a great question. So CHIPS is the high value payments network that the Clearinghouse offers. So it's the wire. The Clearinghouse is driving that implementation of ISO20022 for CHIPS, with working with all of our members and participants of the network. Right now, we are targeted to go live in early April of this year. We've gone through 6 rounds of testing so far. We've got 2 more rounds of testing left to do, but all indications, knock on wood, things are going smoothly, and we're expecting a very smooth implementation of CHIPS in just a month or so.
Brilliant, thank you very much. The G20 roadmap for cross-border payments that was recently published has been really the industry goal. I think some of the objectives there were to decrease costs and fees to 1 to 3%, increasing speed for 75% of transactions so that they're available within an hour, for 100% of all users to have at least one form of payment, and increasing transparency. How is the Clearinghouse dealing with ensuring it is compliant and its stakeholders are collectively aiming for this G20, the G20 objectives?
Yeah, so from you mentioned pricing. I would say that's really not in the scope of the Clearinghouse to really talk to how financial institutions are pricing cross-border payments. But what I can say is that the RTP network prices transactions at 4.5 cents per transaction to send, and it's free to receive for any insured bank or credit union. So from that perspective, we don't expect there to be any change when cross-border transactions are enabled on the RTP network. It would still be that same 4.5 cent to send and free to receive. As far as the speed goes, the 75% speed question, I think that right now RTP is much, much faster than that, right? We clear those transactions within seconds, not hours. And I don't see that changing for cross-border either. We actually completed a pilot looking at US to Euro cross-border transactions. And I would say from a technology perspective, there's probably really no inhibitors for us to be able to do that, to work with other instant payment systems around the globe to be able to make that happen. I think where we have a lot of work to do is probably on the regulatory side. So looking at things like AML, looking at OFAC screening, looking at know your customer regulations, and how those are different across different jurisdictions is where a lot of work is left to be done. But from a technology and a proof of concept standpoint, it actually was very successful.
Thank you very much, Keith. That was Keith Melton, SVP and RTP Strategic Program Manager at the Clearinghouse, talking to Trade Finance Global at the BAFT Trade and Payments Conference here in Washington. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.